Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. I have Mira and Jason Calton. They're authors. They're also fellows of the American Association of Integrative Medicine, and we're going to talk about bone health. They're the world's leading experts on the topics of not only weight management, lifestyle medicine, but especially micronutrient deficiency. So, guys, thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Richard.
Yeah. So why the interest in micronutrient deficiency? That seems like an interesting area to specialize in.
Yeah, it's not exactly the sexiest topic, right? No, we got into it because when I was 30, I was a publicist living in Manhattan, and I was diagnosed with advanced osteoporosis, which means that at the age of 30, I had bones equal to an 80-year-old. And what was even more horrible is that the doctors basically told me that was it for life. Like, there's no getting better. There's no curing osteoporosis. The only reason you got it is because someone in your family has it, which is not true in any way, shape, or form. I have 3 sisters and a mother, and none of them had it. And they basically said, that's it. You have to sell your company and move out of New York City, and someone else is going to have to take care of you. And I did. I had to sell my company and leave New York. And I was trying to find an answer for what had caused this. And the only thing the doctor told me was, you should take some calcium. And calcium is a mineral. And so I started doing research on these minerals. And what I found out was, oh my God, there's other minerals that I don't know anything about. And why didn't anyone talk about these other minerals? And then it struck into vitamins and everything else. And luckily I was able to find a doctor to work with who was interested also in trying to find out more about micronutrients. And we worked together for 2 years, and my body completely healed itself. I no longer have osteoporosis. It was healed after 2 years of working with Jason. And as a bonus, I married him.
How did you know you had a problem? Were you breaking bones, or what happened?
So I just started getting really achy. And this is one thing I want people to understand is when your body starts feeling like it's breaking down, it's not that you just did too many gym classes, because that goes away. It's not that you just, you wore high heels for too many hours. That pain goes away. It's the kind of pain that's a nagging thing where somewhere in your head, you're thinking to yourself, something's really wrong here. And you ignore that voice in your head. Don't ignore that voice in your head. It's trying to tell you. And I literally was, by the end of when I finally went to see the doctor, I was already living on my sofa with my laptop on my lap, lying down, doing all of my work. I couldn't go out anymore. My back just throbbed all down my hips and legs. So I knew something was wrong when I went to see the doctor.
How do you think this happened to you? Did you get a bone scan, or how did you figure out that this was the problem? How was it diagnosed?
Yeah. So, we did a million tests. One of them happened to be a DEXA scan, which is the scan that they use to test bone density. Normally is not given to anyone under the age of 50. So the doctor was like, I'm just being foolish here, but let's just check this. And when he got the results, he literally was more surprised than I was. I mean, we both were equally surprised, I guess, but he was just, he had no idea, had never seen it in anyone my age. I now know that it was a combination of my diet, my lifestyle, and this micronutrient deficiency that was growing in my body, becoming more and more deficient, that had caused it. And now after writing Rebuild Your Bones, which is really a passion project for us, because our goal was to help 1 million people to stop, reverse, and prevent osteoporosis. And I tell them directly in the book, we give you 40 healing habits, the things that I wish someone had told me, things that had I known I was doing in my late 20s, I would have stopped. But I just didn't know that they were going to affect my bones.
What were you eating? Dunkin' Donuts every day? Or how could it be that you got osteoporosis so young?
Isn't that crazy? No, I had the picture perfect healthy diet. According to a lot of people, I woke up in the morning, had black coffee, no sugar in my coffee, no cream in my coffee. And then I went down and got a sugar-free, fat-free muffin because Starbucks was in the building with me. And I had that every day. And for lunch, I had a salad with grilled chicken, fat-free salad dressing, and for a spinach salad, which I thought, was adding in all these nutrients. And then for dinner, I got steamed chicken and Chinese vegetables from the Chinese restaurant. Doesn't sound so horrible, right?
So I guess what, it was just the quality of the food you were getting from all these places was just low quality, or like how could that's odd.
I know. So if you think about it, I can break it down real quick. So a fat-free, sugar-free muffin is basically just a whole bunch of wheat. And wheat contains a whole bunch of anti-nutrients that strip your bones, things like oxalic acid and phytic acid. And they basically rob your body of micronutrients while giving you no micronutrients. They don't actually offer your body any to help you thrive. Spinach salad. Spinach contains oxalic acid. Literally, not only does it pull calcium from your bones, if you eat it daily, imagine the damage you're doing to yourself. A fat-free dressing, all the nutrients, your fat-soluble nutrients need fat in order to be absorbed properly. So the whole idea of eating a fat-free dressing is kind of like wasting so many of the great nutrients that are on your salad. Just every little thing. I mean, I took hip hop class every day. And what are you sweating out? You're sweating out electrolytes, right? And that's the green Gatorade image in your head. And those electrolytes are vitamins and minerals that your body needs in order to build bone every day. So stress, lack of sleep, the EMF given off by your cell phone. There's one thing upon another, and it was just a horrible, a perfect storm that caused that osteoporosis.
So you got this diagnosis, and what did you do then? I mean, you probably were in despair.
I sat in my living room and cried and didn't tell anyone for a really long time. It's embarrassing. When you get sick, you think, I don't want anyone to know. What did I do? It's an embarrassing situation, although it shouldn't be. So I ended up selling my company. I moved to Florida to live with my sister, which I'm an A-type personality, and having to be dependent on someone's not very much fun. And then I started to do the research. One thing about being sick is you have a lot of time to look up bad research on the internet. And it just sent me down this, wild goose chase after wild goose chase. And I knew I needed more help. And luckily someone said, there's this guy, he has a PhD in human nutrition. He is really interested in these odd and end cases. And I bet if you go sit and talk to him, he'll pay attention. Because I had been to the doctors in New York sent me to every single type of specialist in Manhattan. I went to see every single person I could kind of glom onto to try to get some help. And basically,
did you see any like non-allopathic people, like functional medicine people, or just traditional?
No, when I was in New York, you have to remember this was a good 20 years ago. So there really wasn't that many. That wasn't really as spoken about or as offered as it is these days. It wasn't, the awareness wasn't quite there yet. But luckily, I was able to find Jason, and we started working together. And I had done a lot of, research on micronutrients, and he had been doing it for a lot longer than I had. And so we were able to work together to kind of figure out this puzzle of micronutrient sufficiency.
So during the time you were living with your sister, were you eating the same stuff, or had you changed? And, during your research, did you start changing what you were eating before you met Jason, or no?
Yeah. So I started doing, small things. So like, for example, I went to bed at a decent hour. Being in Manhattan doesn't lend itself to that very well, especially being a publicist who has to go out every night.
I'm from New York, and you go out to get food at like 11 o'clock at night, and you're up really late every day.
Exactly. So like I had a whole different schedule, I wasn't walking around anywhere. So like I wasn't doing any hip hop classes. I wasn't sweating. I wasn't doing a lot of cardio. I wasn't stressed out anymore. Stress is a huge, huge impact on bone health. And so that alone would probably, just took a heap of weight off my shoulders. Just having my sister to talk to about it, in fact, was very helpful in terms of the stress reduction. In terms of eating, I hadn't yet figured out that food really mattered yet, which just because doctors leave all that context. Basically it's what you put in your mouth, but they mean supplements, and they mean, pills that they can give you. And I had read the back of the pills for the bone health medications, and they all said not suitable for anyone of childbearing age. And I was like, well, that's not cool. I'm only, I'm just turned 30. And they all said long-term health conditions unknown. They were black box warnings. And I was just like, I just don't think that this shit's for me. I think I need to try a more natural approach.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
Like, how much better did you feel when you were in Florida? Was it just minorly better and you still didn't discover what you needed to help yourself?
Well, I started to feel a little bit better, but I wasn't getting, I knew that my bones could not have been, I'm sure I had done some improvement because I was feeling much better, just in terms of having more energy and feeling a little bit more alive and not as depressed. But I knew that there was so much more that I was reading about that I just couldn't understand because I had no medical background, no science background. And I just didn't know how to read and how to grasp the studies and how to put them all together to have them make sense. So I guess that's what Jason was, really pretty key in bringing about for me.
Yeah. What happened when you met Jason? What was that first experience like? And what did he tell you?
Well, when I first met Mira, she basically came to me and, with a folder full of the research that she had done. And she said, hey, look, I've got all this research. This is what my doctor told me, and they can't figure it out. They can't tell me why I have this condition. Would you help me? And that, micronutrients was not my field of specialty at that time. I was an early researcher in the ketogenic diet. I had been an early pioneer in that diet, and I had even worked with Dr. Atkins on that program. I had retired already by the time that I met Mira. And so I had kind of done what I wanted to do in that particular field. It's still a field of interest for me, but it was something that, I had done. And before I had finished working in that field, I had just started to do some research. I had read a medical study out of Canada talking about how certain micronutrients were, these elite athletes, they were saying, if there's ways that we can improve their performance, because did you know that these minerals were competitive? In the supplement world, nobody really talks about this. The major manufacturers know about what's called micronutrient antagonism or competitions, but to the lay person or the person buying the supplements, or even to people who are very well versed in supplementation, almost nobody is talking about this. And it really was kind of shocking to me. And then when Mira came to me with osteoporosis, obviously osteoporosis is at least in part a deficiency in calcium and magnesium and K and D and quite a few of these different micronutrients. And some of these, like calcium and magnesium, were kind of flagged in this report about that they shouldn't be taken together. They share a similar receptor site. And when one or both are taken together, usually one of them loses out. And so I thought, well, if we're going to do anything here, let's start with the micronutrients. Let's look at, how deficient or sufficient you are in each one. And let's at least start by separating the known natural competitors and see if we can get your body to absorb these micronutrients. And that really became the basis of what we now call our micronutrient therapy, is really our field of study. We've taken this all the way to understanding every single micronutrient competition that can take place between, the formulation, 40 different micronutrients in a typical multivitamin. And then we've even gone as far as patenting our formulation. And we're the first and only vitamin granted a U.S. patent on a multivitamin for formulation.
Yeah, what is this competition like? What competes? What are some of the pairings, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, well, where bone health is involved is really amazing, because if you look at any bone supplement, I'm just going to use bone supplements because we know a lot about them, from our latest book, Rebuild Your Bones. But like A bone supplement always has calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K, and sometimes they have things like boron and a few other things. Well, what's interesting here is that calcium, magnesium, two of the most important bone building minerals, compete with each other. That means if you take in one, you're not going to get the other, or not to the fullest extent that you should. So it makes perfect sense to say, it's just like two kids screaming at each other. They're in the car and they're both screaming at each other, and they're not going to stop even if you tell them to stop hitting each other. If you take one out of the car and separate the two, now you don't have screaming children anymore. And it's the same with micronutrients, the calcium, magnesium screaming and yelling at each other. But if you just separate them and take them at different times and at the correct times and the correct dosages, then you can absorb and you can get the benefits from both of them. The same is true of vitamins D and K. You need both of them for treatment of osteoporosis, but they should never be put into a supplementation in the same formula.
Yeah. And what, to make things even more complicated, within the same research, researchers will point out the fact that magnesium will help or can help the absorption of calcium. So of course, when formulators are putting this together, they see the synergistic effect of how magnesium can help sometimes with the absorption of calcium. So they're like, let's do that. But what they leave out is how calcium blocks the absorption of magnesium. So there's other things like vitamin D, for example, that's synergistic with calcium that can help to absorb calcium. That's the better synergist to pair with calcium, not the magnesium. Vice versa, D and K, they're synergists, right? You need D and K both work together to improve your bone mineral density, but not taken at the same time. And so what becomes very confusing is, how can these synergists be competitors, but they're competitor for receptor site?
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
So have you become like a supplement sommelier? You pair foods with certain vitamins? Or
for 6 years, we sat with a whiteboard in front of us in our office, a big giant whiteboard with all of the micronutrients on them on one side and the same list of micronutrients on the other side. And we would draw big red lines between the ones that we couldn't have in the same formula. Jason was saying, when he first started working with me, I had to literally take every single micronutrient at a different time during the day because we didn't yet understand how they competed with each other. But once we started using this whiteboard, we would draw the lines. And then, 1 year we thought we had it. It was like 3 years in and we had the formulation that we thought was perfect. And then all of a sudden a study came out and said, this one competes. And there goes the whiteboard and you had to start over again. So we're constantly reformulating even our own micronutrient, our multivitamin called Nutrients, because there's always studies coming out and we just need to make sure that we have caught all of these competitions by separating into two complete separate doses taken at different times.
Well, what about foods that people eat, not really highly processed ones, but, natural foods? Does nature tend to put in competing micronutrients or, does it do the opposite?
Great question.
No, it's a great question. And it's so some people will point to that, be like, well, how about food? Well, first and foremost, one of the things I always love things we know, but we don't think about. There is no food on the planet that contains all the vitamins and minerals you'll find in a multivitamin. This is a man-made concept of, hey, let's throw everything that we need, every vitamin, every mineral together in a one-a-day multivitamin. So food doesn't do that. Food separates the micronutrients for the most part. Are there competitive micronutrients? Sometimes, but usually nature, we tend to notice that nature uses these competitive micronutrients kind of like brakes on a car. For instance, cod liver oil. It's a good example of high vitamin A and high vitamin D. So high vitamin A can be toxic, but because it can also contains high amounts of vitamin D, the natural competitor for vitamin A, and vitamin A, vice versa, a competitor for D, these two kind of cancel out each other, and you can take cod liver oil without any real fear of an overdose. So that's an example of how nature uses a natural competition kind of to protect you from a toxic overdose. But in general, no, food, basically in its innate wisdom, most of the micronutrients in food, if there is a competitive micronutrient, one is much higher than the other. And so you mostly absorb that one. Not like a multivitamin or any of these supplements where people just say, hey, we need all the B vitamins. That's a good example. Almost always you see somebody's taking a B complex. just because it says B in front of it doesn't mean all the Bs get along. It's like going to a family reunion, lots of people do get along, and then Uncle Joe walks in and nobody gets along with. Well, the Bs are like that. So vitamin B5 and B7 compete. Vitamins B1 and vitamins B2 compete. So taking them in a complex, you tend to create competitions, whereas if you understand these competitions, you can separate them and be able to absorb everything without having to use mega dose therapies, which is what a lot of these supplement companies kind of fall back on.
Oh, that's really interesting. So what was a protocol early on? Like, would you take certain supplements at certain times and others at other times? Or, like, let's say you had two supplements that had, I don't know, I'll just make it up, B1 and B2 in them. One was high in B1, the other one was high in B2. Would you have to take extra supplements to kind of deliberately change the competitive balance to get absorption?
No, he actually made me take vitamin A, 8 a.m., vitamin B1, 9 a.m., vitamin B2, 10 a.m., literally all separated, because we knew that so many other competitions were likely to be that we just didn't know about yet. We didn't want that to even be a possibility. So what we try to do is literally separate all of them. I had handfuls, like it was awful. 2 years of 100% completely awful. And meanwhile, as it started to work for me, we didn't yet make a product or have a patent. So as it was working for me and other people started hearing about it, we started putting clients on the protocol. They hated it just as much as I hated it. We had so many people complaining about, how do you expect me to take all these things? That's the reason we actually started formulating, is because we were like, okay, look, this works. We know there's something to this. And it's not just for bone health. It's the same thing. If you have, say, high blood pressure, that's a disorder of calcium, magnesium, and potassium, 3 micronutrients. So if you can get those micronutrients all to enter your body at the right time, separated, you can get rid of your high blood pressure. So we started working with people in all different areas, and we knew that we really had to formulate and get this product out. So that's why we created it, because it's just a nightmare otherwise.
So what kind of patterns, I don't want you to give away anything proprietary, but what did you notice when you were studying the interplay of the micronutrients? Are there patterns there?
Yeah, there are some patterns. There's actually 4 different kinds. I think Mira is referring to 4 different kinds of competition. So that, it's not like just at receptor site. You've got things so the 4 different types of competition are chemical competition, biochemical competition, physiological competition, and clinical competition. So basically an example of a chemical competition would be if 2 micronutrients were put together, let's say in a multi-nutrient formula, like a multivitamin. Those 2 nutrients can combine and they can create an insoluble salt right in that formulation.
And the cool thing about that one is that that's why they make everyone eat food with their vitamins, is because they give you stomach upset. When micronutrients do not give you stomach upset, you don't get stomach upset by eating a food that has the same micronutrients. It's because they form these insoluble salts. So by separating them, clearly it just immediately solves that problem for people. So that's why we tell people not to eat when they're taking supplements.
Right. So an example of this is vitamin B9, folate, and zinc. So when they're put into a supplement together, they create this insoluble salt. So it activates these micronutrients before you even get a chance to swallow the pill. Then you have things like biochemical competition, where this happens after the ingestion has been done. An example of that is copper and zinc taken at the same time. This is a receptor site. So this is, that's the same thing, calcium and magnesium. That's the receptor site one. Physiological competitions take place more, one micronutrient kind of causes a decreased utilization of another one. This is when both have been absorbed, but having too much of something in the body. For example, there was a big study done, and we talked about cod liver oil earlier. A lot of proponents of cod liver oil have backed away from it because it is so high in vitamin A, even with the competition of D, that when the vitamin A levels in the body get so high, researchers found that D levels, after they've been absorbed even, are reduced in the body, so that it can create this physiological competition. And then there's what's called clinical competition. And that's something that we've heard a lot about, like, B9 or folate kind of masking a deficiency of B12. One kind of masks a deficiency of another one. So anyway, there's a lot of different types of competitions. There's also the equally important and really good
the
second half of it, which is called synergy. You have just as many synergies, where certain micronutrients, when they're paired together, can either help enhance absorption or create
improve utilization.
Yeah, improve utilization or create these effects that we didn't expect. Like, for example, like B6, B12, and B9, when combined in the body, and B2 also usually, those B vitamins can lower homocysteine levels in the body. This is something that, we didn't realize, but now we realize when you put them together, this can lower inflammation causing homocysteine levels.
But none of the synergies can ever take place if the competitions are not remedied. So you don't get any of those benefits if those micronutrients are in competition still. So you have to eliminate the competitions and then go after we got that board done. We had to look at how many of the synergies we could still help and take place.
I mean, I think the biggest aha moment for us was once we started to understand these competitions really made a lot of sense. I mean, first of all, I don't know if you've seen Forbes magazine, Time magazine, front cover articles. I mean, this is the cover articles, the death of the multivitamin. Don't take it anymore. It doesn't work. But scientists and doctors have been telling us all that the multivitamin doesn't work for years. I mean, you could, 20 years ago, you could have gone to your doctor and your doctor probably said, well, you can take it, but you're just going to urinate most of it out. The reason why you urinate most of the typical multivitamin out is because of these antagonisms. This is what they're talking about. This is why Albion, which is one of the biggest mineral companies in the world, have like 100 patents on what's called chelated minerals, because they know minerals compete. Everybody who knows anything about micronutrient science understands this. But when it comes to supplementation, we don't make the buyer aware of it. We just say,
well, it's a lot harder for a company like us to create products. Most of our friends and who are also in the health field, they are doing a great job at what they do, but they're creating products that are just being, white labeled from everybody else's. Nobody wants to make a product that's harder to create or that takes the consumer twice a day to take at different times. It makes it harder. You have to really understand and have a desire to get healthy in order to want better supplementation.
But this is a very important thing, because once we start to understand that micronutrient deficiencies are at the root of so many of our modern health conditions and diseases, Mira mentioned, hypertension. If you've ever read the DASH diet, which is the number one diet prescribed by all the medical, the allopathic type medicines, and even holistic medicine people, this is a diet to help you to reduce hypertension, but it all comes down to being sufficient in 3 micronutrients: calcium, potassium, and magnesium. So when we start to think about health conditions and diseases, whether it's heart disease with CoQ10 deficiency, or diabetes, or hypertension, or stress, or cancer, or, you name it. Every single one of these diseases has peer-reviewed medical journal studies showing that at its root, at some point, we've got micronutrient deficiencies causing damage. And, when we're all walking around out here deficient in our micronutrients and we scratch our heads when we get our diseases, it helps to start to understand if we can start to create micronutrient sufficiency in our lives, not only can we take things like osteoporosis and hypertension and many others and either stop the damage or reverse them, but we can prevent so many of these diseases.
Well, you talked about deficiencies being masked. So tell me about that a little bit. What gets masked and how?
Example is kind of like folate and B12. If you're deficient in B12, but you have folate, in the body coming in through supplementation, it can mask a B12 deficiency. So meaning that in order to know if you actually, have a B12 deficiency, you'd have to do some other tests. So a person suffering from anemia, might be like, oh, or another one is, iron and copper. It may look like you've got an iron deficiency, but in all reality, because copper is needed for the proper metabolism of iron, oftentimes it's really a copper deficiency.
D and boron. I mean, there's lots of D
examples. And boron. A lot of times people they take 10,000 IUs of vitamin D and they still go to their doctor and they're like, you're taking 10,000 IU and you're still deficient. It's because boron is needed to convert the inactive, form of vitamin D3 to the active form. And so many people are deficient in boron That's the weak link. That's the limiting agent. And so unless we're sufficient in the boron, we'll never get enough vitamin D. So things like this, understanding how micronutrients function, how they work, and how they're converted to biologically active, micronutrients in the body goes a long way to then being able to say, oh, wow, I've actually created this micronutrient sufficient state, an environment where health can flourish.
And it doesn't have to be so complicated. Like, I know if you're listening right now and you're like, I was when I got diagnosed, micronutrients, I have no idea what they're talking about. I've heard a little bit about them. And even if, I didn't realize there was competition, where do I find out more? We've cut it down and we've made it super simple. So we have something called the ABCs of supplementation, and they can go there. We can give you some links later to share with your audience. But on ABCs of supplementation, we go through the A, B, C, and S, which are the 4 factors, which will tell you whether or not you're supplementing smart. A is absorption. Does your product absorb? We tell you how to find out. B, beneficial quantities and beneficial forms. Is there enough of it in it? Is there too much of it in it? And also, is it the inactive form where unless you've got a great gut health, you're going to be able to switch it over? You need to know the forms that are best to be in the product, because it's like a Yugo and a Porsche. One is, they're both cars, but they're very, very different in how fast they're going to get you there. The C is micronutrient competitions, and the S is micronutrient synergies. And we go over all of those and actually give you checklists so you can take any product that you're currently taking, read the back of the label, and see where yours is winning and where yours is losing, and if you should keep it or if you should change it, and just what you need to know about supplementing smart for your body.
Yeah, this is super interesting because this could lead to a whole new area of medicine. I'll give you an example. Like, when my wife started taking metformin, and I looked it up, and it said it depletes B12.
Right.
And she wasn't feeling good, so I got her some B12 supplement, and she felt better. And she was like, "Why did the doctor tell me that?" And I was like, "Please, And then, but so if someone comes to you and they're, I take thyroid medication, for instance, what would help me convert better? So,
right. I mean, most people don't know when they start taking our product and they're like, my doctor didn't tell me anything about my thyroid meds. Well, thyroid meds compete with your calcium, your magnesium. You literally have to take it over 4 to 6 hours away from your supplements, or it's either going to make your medication not work, or it's going to make the supplement not work. So there are all these crazy things that why we're not being told these. You might go to the doctors and be like, oh my God, I have, osteoporosis because I haven't been absorbing any of my calcium, magnesium.
Right.
And then they're going to say, oh, well, you shouldn't have taken it near your thyroid meds. Yeah.
In fact, the rise of so much prescription medication is, people say, why are people so much more micronutrient deficient than our ancestors or even our grandparents? And really, obviously, it comes down to stress, and it comes down to toxic load. It comes down to medications. I mean, 40, and 50, acids. 60 years ago, people might have been on one medication. Now today it's averaging, 5 or 6 medications. And each one of these medications deplete micronutrients. So it's, and we go over all of this. I mean, in the book, we even give charts. I mean, pages and pages long.
There's like 5 pages of every type of medication, the names of the medications, and which micronutrients they're blocking.
Yeah. So it's helpful. It really allows you, like Mira said, it can be overwhelming, but when you take it step by step, now we start to look at this. And when we get people come in, I mean, and they're like, okay, I'm on these medications. We give them the list. This is my lifestyle. This is what I'm eating. We reverse engineer that because, like Mira said, there's these anti-nutrients. We know which micronutrients the anti-nutrients deplete or prevent from absorption. And by the time you get kind of this full picture, we then compare the theorized deficient micronutrients to what health conditions that they're actually suffering from and their blood work. And oftentimes it's like 80 to 90% right on, even compared to the blood work. And it allows them to say, that's why I have this. Because knowing why you have a health condition or disease is better than just sitting around saying, well, I have no idea why, and I don't know what I can do about it.
It's empowering.
Yeah,
definitely. It sounds like you would have had to get, it sounds like science needs a, like kind of an AI algorithm or expert system that would take a look at all these micronutrients, look for conflicts, look for synergies, and, spit out a whole bunch of different formulations that would work or not work.
Yeah. Well, we have published quite a few of, we actually were going to create something, a computer program like this, and we still, have it in the works, but it is quite a complicated thing. The way I do it now is I do it old school. If somebody says to me, I have this supplement or this supplement, I'll look at it and be able to help them to be able to tell you, take this here, take this with
and
that.
And they can go to Compare Your Multi.
And we have, it's called compareyourmulti.com. If you have a supplement or especially a multivitamin and you're like, well, is my multivitamin competing? You can go to compareyourmulti.com and enter in, I think we ask, 13, 14 questions about your multivitamin. You have to have it with you, maybe more. And then we spit out a 15, 20 page report as to what's good about it and what's bad about it. We're not here trying to, downplay anybody else's product. We just want to give you the absolute truth. So, based on the answers you give us, we'll tell you what's good and bad about it.
The cool thing is, if say you have osteoporosis and that means you're polydeficient in your calcium, magnesium, your K, D, your boron, and a few others, your omega-3s most likely. And then we put you on a supplementation program. Look, your osteoporosis is not going to go away overnight, but we are having people in as short as 4 months going back and getting their DEXA scan and getting improvements, even at 70 years old and even somebody in a wheelchair. But besides that, what you will do is you're going to wake up in a week and be like, oh my God, I think I've been sleeping every night, or I haven't gotten up to pee in the middle of the night. Or you're going to say, I feel so much more clear-headed. I got more energy. Or look, oh my God, my nails are growing and I don't have big white dots in them. Because the same micronutrients that we're going to give you for osteoporosis, it's like a big orchestra. They all work together for every single bodily function you have to do every day, all day. You require these. They are essential micronutrients, meaning you must take them in or you don't have them. Your body's not making these things. You need to take them in. So as you're taking these in for whatever health condition you currently have, they're going to be healing and solving and making, just such beautiful icing on this cake of your body. You know what I mean? Everything will slowly improve. And it's really, really nice to see that along your journey because it gives you that hope, that understanding that you are improving. And then we do a lot of blood tests with our people because, there's always the calculated people that just want to see the science.
Well, what about a person's diet, though? Certain people's diets and what they're eating would go counter maybe to what you guys are offering, or it doesn't matter. It's as long as they're having your supplementation, they can still eat whatever they're eating and it'll improve it.
You're exactly right. So in the book, we first talked about it in our book, The Micronutrient Miracle, which we go over 9 condition-specific protocols and teach people how to become micronutrient sufficient. But when it comes to diet, we kind of coined a term called the Nutrivore. We believe that, one of the things that we did, and we didn't talk about early on, but I'll just briefly touch on it. One of the things that after Mira reversed her osteoporosis, we traveled around the world for 7 years, living with remote tribes all over the world, from the Amazon to Papua New Guinea and India and China, everywhere, all over the world, trying to talk with some of their elders and trying to, get as much of the nutritional and lifestyle information as we could from these elders before that information was pretty much lost. And one of the things that when we came back from that, it's called the Colton Project. People can read more about it on the website if they want to. When we came back from that, we realized that, diet is kind of like a wagon wheel. There is optimal health in the middle, and there's all kinds of spokes coming off of that middle of the wheel. And each one of those spokes is a different dietary philosophy that will get you there. You can create optimal health through veganism. You can create it through keto. You could create it through being a carnivore. You can create it through Mediterranean. You can create it. Every one of these diets, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, every one of these diets has peer-reviewed medical journal studies showing benefits to the diet. Every one of them. It may not be the diet you've chosen for right now, but the other side of that coin is every single one of these diets has a pitfall. And that pitfall is a deficiency in specific micronutrients. Again, these can be found in research studies. We talk about them in the book, like vegans and vegetarians. Everybody knows that, you can't get B12 very well if you're a vegan or a vegetarian. Vitamin D is low. Omega-3 is low. Zinc, the gluten-free diet, they are low in a lot of the B vitamins and zinc. Primal, they're low in calcium, chromium, and B12. Low-fat dieting, they're low in the fat-soluble vitamins, like Mira was talking about, A, D, E, and K. So what we talk about with the Nutrivore is, listen, what you want to do with your dietary philosophy is up to you. We support that. We don't want to change that. Our thing is, let's put the horse before the cart this time. The horse being micronutrient sufficiency. So if you come to me and say, hey, I'm a low-fat dieter or I'm a Mediterranean dieter, then we say, okay, here's your pitfalls. You're going to have high omega-6. You've probably got lots of anti-nutrients. Research shows you're low in these micronutrients. So let's fill the gaps. And then you go on being your Mediterranean dieter by also being micronutrient sufficient. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what food you're eating. If you're sufficient in your micronutrients, you're going to be healthy. If you think that diet is going to provide for you even the minimum level of what you need for micronutrients, that is absolutely, there has never been a research study ever been able to be published showing that any diet can provide all the essential micronutrients. In fact, that was the basis of my dissertation. And I eventually published a study called The Prevalence of Micronutrient Deficiency in Popular Diet Plans in the International Journal of Sports Nutrition. And it's amazing to look at, even when I looked at it, I looked at all the different popular diets as high as 1,800 calories per day. And they were still more than 50% deficient in all the micronutrients. You'd actually
Okay, so I'm going to play a game with you real quick, Richard. If you had to guess what number of calories you had to eat in a single day in the study to become sufficient in all of your micronutrients, what do you think that number is? And these are popular diets. These were like well-known popular diet plans.
Oh, if you're eating just according to a certain diet plan.
So we looked at
how much food would you have to eat in order to become sufficient in your essential micronutrients? We looked at 27 essential micronutrients.
How many calories?
You said I would say infinite, because you say there's nothing you can do to have enough, right?
Well, by the time when we looked at these diets and we took it out so that each micronutrient met minimum sufficiency. Remember, minimum sufficiency is like minimum wage. It's not necessarily optimal sufficiency, but you're not going to get a disease by it. It came out to around 23,000 calories a day. This is
That's why we say there's no actual real diet, because no one's ever going to do that, nor should anyone ever eat 23,000 calories a day.
Right.
But that's what it actually took. And these are in the books of many famous dietitians and doctors. These are the diets they created to help different diseases. And yet basically each one of them was proven to leave you heavily deficient in micronutrients.
Yeah.
Which would further, you might get a slim waist, but you also might get heart disease.
Exactly. I mean, even like the DASH diet, which is based on micronutrient therapy for hypertension. Yeah, they help you to create a diet that's sufficient in calcium, magnesium, and potassium, but they don't worry about any of the other micronutrients. By the time you've eaten enough food to get sufficient in those, you're deficient in 10 others.
So are there diets that people shouldn't be on because they'll confound this protocol that you have to help them?
No.
We let people do any single one.
I mean, you shouldn't be on, a junk food diet, but
but almost nothing is so competitive that it would
not in food.
Yeah, no, we allow people to be on any diet. It's just the awareness. Like if you're going to be vegan, you better know that there's higher levels of anti-nutrients in everything you're eating. Everything you're eating, because it's all vegetables, has a lot of anti-nutrients. So you need to know that so you can be smart about supplementation. If you're, and the other thing is if you want to look at the least competitive one or the least offensive, I guess, in terms of competition stuff, is probably the paleo diet, because it gets rid of all legumes and all wheat and sugar. Those are really the big competitors there. But their problem is that they include so many nuts and nuts and seeds, and that's a really big problem for them.
It has high amounts of omega-6, which just drives that inflammation through the roof. So, each diet has its own pitfalls, and they have their own benefits too. I mean, that's the thing. One of the things that are our big kind of overarching vision is eventually to try to create, number one, establish micronutrient therapies, and then number two, to try to kind of create a unification of diet theory. Right now, a carnivore and a vegan walk into a restaurant and, you could have a fight by the time they leave. This is like a religion for them. And that's great, but we've fractured our dietary philosophies. And in doing so, we've really stopped our ability to be able to move forward in the field of dietary science. I mean, because everybody's arguing with one another. Nobody wants to talk about anything. My diet's better than your diet. At the end of the day, who cares what you're eating if you eat the ultimate goal? There's only one universal truth in nutrition. We've got lots of, universal truths in engineering and other parts of science and math, but in nutrition, there's only one. And that is, you must be sufficient in your essential micronutrients or you will get a health condition or disease. That is the only thing that all nutritionists and all medical professionals will agree on in nutrition. Other than that, you've got an argument. And if that is the only universal truth in nutrition at this point, then that, we believe, is the first spot we should start from to unify, these things. Nobody says you can't eat a vegan diet, but what happens 5 years down the line when you're like, oh my gosh, like so many of our colleagues who've written books on veganisms have been leaders of veganism. And, 5 years later, they're like, oh, my doctor told me I'm losing my hair. I don't have enough protein. I don't feel well. Now I'm a pescatarian. Well, that's fine. Switch to being a pescatarian. But the idea of a nutrivore is no matter what you choose, you always create micronutrient sufficiency based on it. And therefore, you are always on the path towards optimal health.
So, okay. So what are some of the resources that you have for people? Is it, do they do a consult with you in some cases and then you evaluate and have them shift their vitamin protocol? Or is the book a better place to start? Like, what are some of the resources for people?
Yeah. So, Micronutrient Miracle was not the last book, but the one before that. Micronutrient Miracle is more of for any health condition. Rebuild Your Bones is the newest book, and that's definitely for people with osteoporosis or other bone conditions. The other way to reach us is the Coltons at coltonnutrition.com. We answer all the questions, and that's a great place to start, poking into what we do. coltonnutrition.com is our website.
ABCs of optimal supplementation
is a great website. The compareyourmulti.com is a great place to start. Basically, we would start with those. What we do with a lot of clients is they read one of the books and then they contact us. We then send them to SpectraCell, which is a very specific website. On our website, there's a specific area for the SpectraCell test. They go there, they get a test. It does all of their blood work, but it's a very different type of blood work that's showing all their micronutrient levels. And then after we get the results back, we sit down, do an hour-long consult with them and put them on a program and check back with them every 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, Mira was right. It is ABCs at supplementation.com.
Okay, got it. Do you have a certain subset of people that take a whole bunch of vitamins, a whole bunch of supplements, and what do you do with them if they're, if they have 20 different supplements a day?
Yeah, they send us the list when they go for the consults. And then Jason sits down and patiently explains to them after reviewing what's the ingredients in every single one, because some people turn in pages. And we literally try to save them a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and getting better results by limiting and getting rid of the competitions. And I think everyone finds it extremely eye-opening after they do these consults, like, oh my God, I can't believe I was just creating chaos in my body.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlapping. So we'll look at all of them. A lot of times, I would say probably about at least a third to half of the supplements they're taking now, we just don't need, while we're getting sufficient. So many of them have overlap, so we'll want to get those out. Nutrients, which is the main multivitamin, gives you basically all of the essential vitamins and minerals. And then there's a lot of other supplements that people want to take, and herbal supplements and add-ons for special health conditions. And then we'll help them to kind of, fill those in so that they don't create competition.
Well, have you been able to formulate a multi that works? Or do people still have to take a whole bunch of supplements in order to make it?
No. Now it's just twice a day powder. We do have capsule too now, but it was originally a powder, and we still offer that AM powder and PM powder.
Yeah, it's called Nutrience, NUTREINCE. And it's super easy to take. Literally, if you imagine, you'd have to take at least 4 to 6 capsules to get the amount of vitamins and minerals. But because we made it originally into a drink packet that you put in water, you don't have to take the full huge handful. You just pour it in a glass of water, mix it up, drink it down, 1 in the morning, 1 at night. We've got 4 different types of flavor packet boxes. Everyone's going to like one or the other. And we make a shake twice a day. And we also use the same kind of anti-competition technology on our Omega product because, again, omega-3s, most people don't know, the EPA and the DHA, the 2 components in fish oil that make it beneficial, they compete with each other. So we've gone to a special lab to separate the EPA from the DHA. And we have people take the EPA with their morning nutrients and the DHA with their evening nutrients. So they can get the benefits of both the EPA and the DHA at very high levels.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another.
Enjoy a good patent.
Yeah, that's another supplement that a lot of people, they say, oh, I take a fish oil, or I take a krill, or I take a krill because it's been shown to be more absorbable than a fish oil. The reason why it's more absorbable is because it contains more EPA than DHA than a fish oil does, which is typically almost a 50-50 blend. When you get more of one or the other, obviously the one that you have more of is going to absorb more, hence why krill oil is theoretically more absorbable. But it's the idea is if you can separate them completely, you can absorb them both at 100%.
And they serve very different functions in your body. So it's important to get both.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other insights before we wrap up? What's the future of your work? Like, what are the new stuff that you're working on for the next year or two that people can look out for?
Well, we have, we've written now 4 books and a textbook on micronutrient therapy and lifestyle medicine. So we have, we've really, we've dug deep into micronutrients. I'd like to get back into the macronutrient space. We have some ideas as to kind of a next generation ketogenic diet, something, quite different. And I'd like to pair what we're doing with micronutrient therapy with the macronutrients now and kind of bring it full circle.
Okay. Well, very good. Amira and Jason, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Richard, thank you very much, so much. Richard.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.